The shlichus that I went on together with my colleagues was a different kind of a shlichus that ever existed. And that was the fact that when the Rebbe sent us to Israel, he sent half of us married and half of us single. And he said, it's not enough to support the land of Israel financially. I want to also send people that will represent me in Eretz Yisrael, in Israel. And I happened to have been one of the single guys. It was half-half. The single guys went to Yerushalayim, and we learned in the old city of Jerusalem. And the married fellows went up to Tzfat, in the Galilee. And he sent us to settle the land. I didn't have any family in Israel. All my family is either in Canada or the United States. I was born in Detroit. I was raised in Toronto. I've got a lot of family here also in New York. I came to Eretz Yisrael. We had to get married in Israel. We had to find our soulmates. The Rebbe didn't allow us to come back for a couple of years. No exceptions. For whatever reason, we still don't know till today, but we had to settle in. And Baruch Hashem, we all settled in, and we're all involved in different cities. And my wife is originally from the underground Chabad of Russia. She grew up in Russia, in the Chabad movement of Russia, underground, yeshiva, schools, shechita, Shabbos, the works. And she got out of Russia in 1969. When I was celebrating the New York Mets winning the World Series, she got out of Russia. So we had to get to taunt, to get together, as they used to say then. And Baruch Hashem, we've raised our family in Eretz Yisrael. So that's where I'm coming from, and that's the shlichus that I'm in right now. I'd like to go back a little bit in history. 1897, as far as I remember. The Rebbe, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad, started the first yeshiva of Chabad, the formal yeshiva. There was always people learning in Lubavitch, but they weren't in a formal yeshiva. He started a formal yeshiva. He called it the Yeshiva of Toimchei Tmimim of Lubavitch. And at the time when he founded the yeshiva, which was in a small village in the town of Russia, he said that it's not enough. He said like this, I'm not opening up a yeshiva today because there's a lack of yeshivas. Thank God there's a lot of yeshivas in the world. I'm opening up a yeshiva today because I want to educate students that when they, through their education, they will realize their responsibility to be neirot laha'ir. They will be candles that will give light. They will enlighten the world. They will be soldiers in King David's army. And the Rebbe quoted a Talmudic statement that in King David's army, the soldiers that went out to the front lines before they went out to battle, they wrote to their wives divorce. They gave a wife a divorce on condition. If we come back, we're still married. If not, if I'm missing in action or killed, the divorce starts from now, in order that there shouldn't be any aguna problems or any other difficulties. And the Rebbe said in 1897, he said, these are the students that I want to educate. They're going to go out into the world to fight the battle against assimilation, to fight the battle against those that are trying to destroy Jewish identity, to instill hope and faith in the Jewish people, and trust in God in all their lives, and also to prepare the world towards the coming of Mashiach, to make this world a better place. In 1897, when he said these statements, it was a statement, you have to realize, in a small Russian village with maybe 30, 40 students at the time. Prophetic were his words, because today we're all around the world, thousands of us, being candles to give light to Jewish people wherever we are, being on the front lines of fighting assimilation, giving Jewish identity, and that started from 1897. Now, when the Rebbe sent us, he quoted a Rambam. I'm going to quote Maimonides. The Rambam says in his Hilchas Shemitah V'Yovel, when he talks about the laws of Shemitah, the sabbatical year, and the Jubilee 50th year, at the end of the Rambam over there, he says that there was a special tribe called Shevet Levi. And they didn't have a part in dividing up the land of Israel. They were given certain towns to live in. And their task, the tribe of Levi, was to serve the Jewish people, by protecting the temple, by going around and making sure that the Jewish people are acting according to what they should be doing. And then the Rambam finishes off his last law, and he says, V'loi shevet Levi bilvad. Not only does the tribe of Levi have this task, Ela kol ish ve'ish mikol boy oilam, any single individual from the world, asher not varuchai oisai, that will volunteer with all of his heart, ve'ivinu madoi, and he will understand, come to an understanding, libodel, to separate himself from the regular way of life, lamoid lifnei Hashem lishorsoi, to stand in front of God and to serve Him, v'ladeas Hashem, to spread and to know and to have knowledge in God, v'holach yosher, and he will go with a straight path, and he won't make the regular cheshbonot. How would we say that in the regular calculations and how a person makes his decisions? He's not going to be just a regular individual that when he makes decisions it's based on what's in it for me. But he's going to be dedicated and devoted for the Jewish people. Those people also will have the same thing what the tribe of Levi has. That God will be their lot, not property. And they'll be involved in real estate, but not in the real estate of having a piece of land in Israel, but they'll have their real estate in all the shuls and mikvahs and yeshivas and schools and preschools and Jewish homes. That will be their real estate that they own. And they will merit to have a portion in the world to come. And God will provide for them their basic needs that they need, just like He provided for all the Kahanim and the Leviim, their basic needs also. And this the Rebbe quoted to us as we were leaving on the Shlichus. Not everyone has to be a Levite to be born a Levite. You can become a Levite by volunteering, by giving up the regular things of life and becoming a part of God's army, of being in the front lines. And the Rambam writes about this, and on this Rambam, the Rebbe has founded the whole work of Shlichus throughout the world. The Rebbe took this halacha, this law in the Rambam, and he brought it down to earth. That you can actually see people today, thousands of people, that are not born Levites, but they have volunteered to be from the Shevet Levi, as the Rambam writes. And as interesting to note, last week's Torah portion that we read, when Avram was going to battle to try to save the city of Sodom, he turned to Hashem, to God, and he said to him, Ha'im yesh chamishim tzadikim betoich ha'ir. Are there 50 tzadikim living in Sodom? And God said, no. 45? No. 30, 40, 30, 20, 10? No. And he used the terminology, Ha'im yesh chamishim tzadikim betoich ha'ir. Are there 50 tzaddikim living within the city? In Hebrew, you could also say, Ha'im yesh chamishim tzaddikim ba'ir. Do you have 50 righteous people living in the city? What's in the midst of the city? And the Rebbe once explained, and he said, it's not, to be able to save the city of Sodom, or those 5 towns, it's not enough to have 50 righteous people living in the city. They've got to be involved in what's going on in the city. They have to be living in the midst of the city. They have to have an awareness of what's going on in their cities. They have to take an interest in every individual and every part of the community. Those are the kind of people that can save cities. This is what Avram Avinu was asking for. He wasn't just asking for righteous people. He was asking for people that are involved, that they recognize their responsibility and their commitment is to feeling and having a sensitivity for everything that's going on in their cities and their towns. And because of that, they have to give up things. You know, I mentioned before, I grew up over here. I was sent single. I got engaged in Israel. You know how I was able to tell my parents when I was going out? Today we're living with the cell phones and with everything else that goes on today. But in those days, there wasn't any phones in Israel. After every date, I had to walk over to the central bus station in Jerusalem and get on a payphone and dial 1-8 and wait for a half hour for an operator to call me back. Meanwhile, people jabbing at me because, you know, in Israel, it's a little... you got to learn how to be assertive a little and aggressive over there. And then, after a half hour, have to speak to my parents to relate to them what happened the date while the buses are honking away and people nagging me in the back and telling them. And then as I came to my engagement party, and I was sitting there before anyone came, and I'm sitting there, there's no one from my family. Not my mom, not my dad, not my brothers, not my sisters. I'm the only guy representing myself. You're getting engaged. It's a time that you want to share with your family. And here I am sitting there, and I started to tear up a little. And I said, 1 second, I said, Mandy, take it easy. I said, you're not here by yourself. You were sent. And the Rebbe knew what it means to send single guys to have to get married in Israel by themselves in 1978 without cell phones. Without phones at all. It took me 8 years to get a phone after I got married. 8 years to get a phone in my house. I remembered my science when I was learning. Transportation and communication went together, so I finally bought a car before I got a phone. That's how it was at the times. And this is what the Rambam writes. Giving up the regular, everyday things that a normal person lives with to be able to devote yourself, to volunteer, and to be able to be involved in working to build a land, to build communities, to build cities. This is what the Rambam meant. But you know, when you learn the Rambam inside, it's a nice concept, it sounds good. But when you got to live the Rambam, that's a different story. And that's what the Rebbe, what's so special about our Rebbe, that he took everything out of the book and he instilled in us to be able to live with it. Not just to read it, not just to understand it. And that was the launching, and that is what Shlichus is all about. To give up on the regular things for the community. I saw an interesting letter from the Rebbe. A fellow was a chief rabbi of a small country. And he had a very good offer in a top New York synagogue to become the rabbi there. And he sent into the Rebbe his contract that they offered him. And the Rebbe writes back to him and he says to him, I was hoping that I didn't have to write this letter. I had heard about the offer, and I was hoping that I just wouldn't have to write. But because you're sending me in the contract already, I got to tell you what I think. He says, you're a chief rabbi of a small country, that the Judaism of that country, the Jewish identity of that country, everything that's going on in that country, you have such tremendous influence on. A rabbi in New York City, he says it might be for your own comforts, it might be better for you. You'll have a community, you'll have all the kosher foods, you'll have the educational system built, and you'll have neighbors and an environment. But you are creating the Yiddishkeit in the place that you're living. How can you give that up for your own comforts and your own benefit when you see the work that you're doing? We have a concept, the Rebbe writes, when we have an argument between Yochid v'Rabim, when we have a single opinion against the majority opinion, halacha kerabim, we go according to the majority opinion. The Rebbe says, the benefits for the majority, for the public, and your benefits, your personal benefits, you gotta put your personal benefits off to the side and keep into account what you are doing in the place that you're living. And even if you're going to find a replacement, it's going to take him years till he finally digs in and he's going to understand the mentality. And how many souls can be lost? How many people will be lost to us? How many things that could have been built will be lost until then? And he says, and the Rebbe says, and if you want to know what my opinion is, I'm not forcing you. My opinion is stay put where you are. And he says, in the end of the day, he says, not only that, when a chief rabbi of a small country comes to New York, he probably has more clout than a rabbi himself in New York. Because he's a chief rabbi of a country. This is what the Rebbe writes. That's putting personal benefits to the side. That's what Shevet Levi is all about. You're here to be able to think about others. You're here to put the community before yourselves. That's what Shevet Levi is. Now the next thing we just learned about in the Parsha. You could be a person that's very active in community work. Well, the word shaliach, emissary, an agent, it means it's got two sides to it. On one side, it's always taking into account that you are representing somebody. You are not on your own. Your measurement stick is not just success. You measure everything the one that sent you. You are an emissary. You are an ambassador. Are you representing the person that sent you correctly? Are you living up to his values? On one hand, that has to be constantly in our minds. We are not just out for the success. We have rules and regulations. We have values that we have to stand up to. We have a Rebbe that sent us. And everything that we do, we always have to question ourselves, are we living up to his values? Is that what really counts? Just like when Avram sent Eliezer, he set him straight, your mission. You got to find a shidduch for my son Yitzchak. It's got to be from the family. If she doesn't want to come back, then turn right or turn left. That's your mission. And God should bless you. And he gives him a contract saying that he's giving everything to Yitzchak to be able to show the greatness of what Yitzchak is, also even financially. And he says to him, and God will help you and he'll send his angels in front of you to help you and give you success. But he was clear in what his mission is. And Eliezer had a side interest. He had a self-interest, it says. He had his own daughter. He says, if she doesn't want to come, maybe, sorry. He says, we're good pals. You're my good, you serve me well, but I have to have somebody from the family. That's the way it is. And Eliezer put his self-interest aside. He was a real shaliach. This is what the one that's sending me, this is Avram's, and he had that keen sense all the way through. On the other hand, the Rebbe, just like with our Rebbe, Eliezer wasn't told if he should take a horse or a donkey. He wasn't told exactly how to travel. Not only that, he wasn't even told an address where he could find the family. He comes over to Choron and he walks over to the well. He says, you know what? The first girl that I ask her, and she's going to give me to drink and say my camels also. He comes up with the whole thing. Avram didn't tell him that. A shliach has to be he has to use his mind. He has to use his qualities. He has to be intuitive. He has to be a cheverman. He's got to know how to hustle. He's got to know how to move and maneuver. He has to use what he has. On one hand, he's completely imbued that he's being sent. And you're not on your own. Be careful. On the other hand, you got to be a mensch. You got to know how to work. And it's that blend. It's that harmonious work that a shliach has to go through. To always remember that you're representing somebody. And at the same time, to be able to use out your qualities that were given to you as an individual to the utmost. That's the blend. And the Rebbe says that when we have that harmony, what was the first statement that he said when he sat down, they wanted to give him something what to eat? He says, sorry, no mealtime right now. I have a job to do. I want to talk to you first. And he tells him the whole story. And how does he start his story? I'm a servant of Avram. That's who I am. I have a name. My name is Eliezer, but he doesn't even say what his name is. I represent Avraham Avinu. I'm coming here to represent Avram. I'm on a mission. And he doesn't eat. He says the first thing, he goes through everything. Always to stay focused, not to lose your focus on what your mission is, not to get sidetracked, to be clear. In life, you could get sidetracked. You know, I once had one of my mentors in Israel. He was a good friend. He was a relative of a very famous individual in Israel, Sir Isaac Wolfson. And he was a relative of his. And he had helped my mentor. His name was Reb Zusha Partizan. He was a partisan in the World War II. He had helped him to build different synagogues and so on. Reb Zusha was one of the Rebbe's emissaries in Israel, an older chassid from way back. When I came to Israel, he became my mentor. And Reb Zusha didn't have such good livelihood. And the Rebbe, and he had a job, but he wasn't making real big money. And he was all over the country all the time, helping the young people that are moving in, younger emissaries to establish themselves. So Sir Isaac Wolfson, one day his cousin says to him, you know what, Zusha, you're not making a big livelihood. I have about 25 synagogues that I built here in Israel. I need somebody to go around, you travel anyways, just to check out my synagogues, to make sure the upkeep is okay, to report and to let me know if something has to be fixed, and I'll pay you a salary for that. And Zusha told him, you know what, give me 3 days, I'll get back to you. After 3 days, he got back to him and he said to him, I appreciate your offer, but it's not for me. Thank you. And Zusha was telling me this story, and I said to him, why didn't you take the offer? You're already traveling around the whole way of Israel. Why didn't you take it? You could have made like we say, you could make another buck. It always comes in handy in life. You got to marry kids off, other expenses. He says to me, I thought about it. And I said to myself, then there's going to be something in my life that's not part of my mission of being an emissary and an ambassador for my Rebbe. And even though that it's a fine thing to do, it's not for me. I got to stay focused on my mission. Here's a fellow, not to be sidetracked, like Eliezer. They're giving him something what to eat. He just traveled. No, keep focused. We have to keep focused on our mission all the time. Then, the Rebbe draws further. You know, as I was growing up, the Rebbe draws from the Rambam again. The Rebbe turned to us and he told us, we got to go out to the Jewish people. We got to influence, we got to help them be strong in their identity. And a lot of time, I don't have to tell you, the Rebbe started his mission in 1951 when he took the leadership formally. At those times when the Rebbe took his leadership, there wasn't a lot going on, especially in outreach. At that time, it was unheard of. The Jewish community was trying to protect itself, the religious community, and there wasn't really a strong connection between the communities. And the Rebbe turned to us to go outreach. It was revolutionary. And the Rebbe again turned to the Rambam. And then he told us, he said that every single Jew, no matter how he looks on the outside, inner core of every single Jew is that he wants to keep and he wants to have a connection with his Jewish identity. And the Rebbe quotes the Rambam. It's a Rambam in Hilchas Gerushin. It's a Rambam that the Rambam quotes. He's talking about the laws of divorce. And he says if the Jewish court decides that a fellow has to give a divorce, it's been a decision by the court that he has to give a divorce, and he refuses to. So although that we have a ruling that a divorce that is forced is not a correct divorce, but once the court rules that a person has to give a divorce, then the Rambam says he can be forced until he says, I am willing to give the divorce. And the Rambam says, but he's just saying, he's paying lip service because being forced, he really doesn't want to give. And the Rambam writes Every single Jewish person, down deep in his core, because he is Jewish, wants to do what God's will is. It's just a matter of bringing it out into the open. And it's not considered being forced once the rabbis have declared that he must give it. And the Rebbe would talk about this Rambam and say, the inner core of every single Jew, he wants to be connected to his roots. He wants to have a connection to God's will. It's the Rambam, chapter 2, the 20th halacha. And the Rebbe again took this Rambam and he extrapolated from this Rambam to dealing with every single individual as a Jewish person, recognizing that inner core that he has. And no matter how covered up it is, you can get to it. And then the Rebbe quoted another Rambam from Hilchas Tshuva, from the laws of Tshuva. And the Rebbe quoted that God judges the world in a different way than we see. He doesn't look at things just on the quantitative level. He looks at things in a quality way. He judges our actions more in the quality. Don't judge a Jew in his external appearance, the Rambam says. One action of one person can be worth a lot more than many actions of another person. A person can be raised in an environment, he got a good education, and he's on automatic pilot in his commitment to what he's doing. He's not there with his heart and soul. And then you have another person that he wasn't raised in the environment like that. And when he puts on that tefillin, it has a lot more quality to it. And the Rambam writes, we judge not the way we look at things. God judges the world in a completely different level, looking at the quality of things and not just the quantity of things. And the Rebbe would quote this all the time to give us that mindset that we should understand that when we're going out into the world, we should measure our actions. We should know how to deal with individuals. We should know how to look at people. You know, when I grew up in the 60s in Toronto. My father had come to Chabad. He wasn't originally Chabadnik. He grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and in Borough Park, here in Brooklyn. My mother's from Chattanooga, Tennessee. And he grew up and they came to Chabad. And my father was active. It was a small Chabad community in Toronto. We were about 12 to 13 families at the time. And I remember as a child growing up how people would look and they would sometimes attack my father. Of course, not physically, but they would attack him verbally. Because at that time, Chabad was the only ones involved in bringing Jewish identity to the rest of the Jewish world. It's hard to believe today, but that's how it was. And they would tell my father, you're dealing with wicked individuals. You're a missionary. And my father would turn to them and say, it's our own brothers and sisters. I'm not a missionary. Wicked. And then he would quote another Rambam that the Rebbe would quote. The Maimonides was up against, in his period of time, he was up against the Karaites. The Karaites were Jewish people that they only believed in the written law and they didn't believe in the oral law. And it was big battles in all the countries where the Karaites were. They were trying to take control of the Jewish institutions. And there was a lot of suffering going on with the Karaites. Those that read the Jewish history, what was going on in Egypt when the Rambam was there with the Karaites. And the Rambam writes that when we look at the Karaites today, he says, the children and the grandchildren of the Karaites, we shouldn't be battling with them, he says. He says, they're not like the initial ones that started the Karaites. They've been raised with the wrong kind of education. And even though they live amongst Jews that are more committed, but because they were raised with an education, the Rambam writes, that wasn't a committed education to their Judaism. It just didn't stick to them, the Rambam writes. And he says they are like individuals that have been raised as a child amongst the non-Jewish world. You cannot blame them. You cannot be judgmental towards them. And the Rambam says, Maimonides says, it's not their fault. And our task is to try our best to show love to them, to try to educate and to bring them back to their roots in a peaceful, pleasant manner. This is the Rambam Maimonides writing about the children and the grandchildren of the Karaites. And obviously when the Rebbe would quote this Rambam, he would say, today in our day and age, the Jewish world, is there what to judge and to blame when we know what's going on in the world of assimilation, the world of education, the Holocaust, the communist regimes, and everything else that they went through, and the lack of education in many communities and cities that we live in? So it was quite clear, as the Rebbe brought out from these laws in the Rambam, how to look at another Jew, how to deal with him, how to understand his inner core, and how to know how to judge in the right way. You know, I travel from time to time, and I visit the shluchim on front lines. I was in a place called Brisbane, Australia. I mean, it's about 1.5 million population, 2,000 to 3,000 Jews. I come to the shliach's house. His kids are being educated online. That's how they have their education. The Jewish school there has got 35 kids from grade 1 to grade 8. The shliach is teaching the Hebrew studies in that school. You can imagine grade 1 to grade 8, 35 children. He wakes me up at 5 in the morning. He says, we got to go to the mikveh first, before davening. I said, yeah, where's the mikveh? He says, in my backyard, the swimming pool. It's in the middle of winter. So I go along with him. I'm in the mikveh, I'm in the swimming pool, I'm thinking to myself, they talk about mikvehs in Siberia. This guy's in Brisbane, Australia. In 2000, it was 2010 at the time. And he says, where are we going now? He says, we're going to daven. Yeah, where? Drives downtown to an old shul downtown Brisbane, Australia, built in World War I. You have all these plaques up from the soldiers that fell in World War I. We walk in 6 o'clock in the morning in Brisbane, Australia. 16 Jews are there to daven. And I'm looking at this. And afterwards it was a Torah class. 7 stayed, coffee and cake. And I say to myself, 16 Jews in Brisbane, Australia is worth at least 16,000 Jews in Jerusalem. It's 6 in the morning in Brisbane, Australia? The pits of the pits. I mean, if anyone's from Australia, I didn't mean to hurt anybody. But I'm telling you, it's unbelievable. And here I am on Thursday. You know, one of the nice things about the Shluchim conference, you rub shoulders, you meet all different kinds of young guys that are out there. And the guy comes over and tells me, you know what? I was raised in Toronto, because he knows I'm from Toronto, and I was born in Rehovot. Oh, that's a good combination for me. I said to him, where are you on Shlichus? In Saskatoon. Now, you got to understand something. I'm from Canada. Saskatoon is like, you know, what should I tell you? It sounds like it looks. 250,000 people, and I ask him, how many Jews are living in Saskatoon? He tells me, how many Jews do you have on your block? So I tell him, I start counting the apartment building, about 100. He says to me, you know what? Add on another third of a block, and that's it. Says, look at him, Saskatoon. I said to him, you know, I remember there was another kind of a city over there, had a name like Moose. Yeah, it tells me Moose Jaw. I said to him, they always stuck in my mind, these two names. How many Jews are there? He said, about 2 or 3 families. He says to me, you know what? When I go to the supermarket and I meet another 2 or 3 Jews there, it's mamish like Simchas Torah. Just to meet the other 2 or 3 Jews in the supermarket, we could just start dancing around the counters. And I say to him, how is it in Saskatoon? Tell me what you're doing. And he starts telling me he has once a month Friday night a meal with a minyan. Now, he's there for a year. And he tells me he has a JLI course once a week. He says, I've got 10 to 12 people participating. And he starts, he tells me, 10 to 12 Jews in Saskatoon. He's trying to explain to me what 10 to 12 Jews coming to a Torah class in Saskatoon means. When the Rambam says you judge things by their quality and not by their quantity. I know what it means in Saskatoon. And I say to him, tell me, what's the most difficult part of your shlichus? And he says to me, it's my kids are home all the time. They don't have a school. My oldest one is now online, so but the rest are home. We have to homeschool them. There's nowhere we have to go. And in the middle of winter, it's about 40 below all the time. That's what kind of weather they have. 30, 40 below. The only thing I know about Saskatchewan is they used to have a CFL team, Saskatchewan Rough Riders. You didn't start up with them. Because when you live out in 40 degree below weather, that's what it's a tough place. And this is one guy standing in 770 in Saskatoon. Because he was taught by the Rebbe and the Rambam telling us how you look at a Jew, how you look at what you have to be doing. And the Rambam goes on and he says, don't underestimate every mitzvah. Hilchas Tshuva, again in the 3rd chapter. The Rambam writes, one mitzvah can tip the scale. That's how you're supposed to look at life. You can tip the scale of this world with one good deed, with one good word, the Rambam says. And that's how you should look at life, he says all the time. Grab opportunities of mitzvahs all the time. Getting another Jew to do a good deed, your own self to do a good deed. Either in action or in speech or in thought. And it doesn't make a difference which age, which gender. Anyone can be the last one that makes the grand finale and tip the scale and bring this world to its completion. Who educated us like that we should appreciate every single good deed and every single action? The Rebbe took that Rambam, he took it out of the Rambam's book and he brought it down to earth. Now I'm just going to finish off because I see already I'm getting my cue. We talk a lot, me and Rabbi Eliezer. Whenever he needs a lenient halachic ruling, he knows who to call. I want to tell you, there was something always that each shliach, that we all felt. Even today we get touched every so often. But, the Rebbe had a very, very special relationship with each and every one of us. And every so often he showed us the personal touch. It's phenomenal how he did it, but he always showed us. It taught me also that with all of our global work, with all of our work in our communities, keep focused on every individual also, their needs and everything. See, I came in, you were telling a story of a bris. I want to tell a story, my own personal story with a bris. All of my kids, my boys, the brises weren't on time because they had jaundice. The blood types of myself and my wife conflicted in a kind of a way that there was a higher percentage of jaundice. And the bris just wasn't on the 8th day because it was high. And I never bothered the Rebbe about it because, he had too much on his mind. And I felt that just because I want to have an 8-day bris, the fact that he's going to have to take time to read about it and to think about it, there's enough things going on. I'll make the bris when you have to make the bris, when he's okay. But one of my sons, it went up so high, the Billy Robin, it almost hit blood transfusion. So, although thank God it peaked and then it went down, the next son that was born, I was already very, very worried about what's going to be over here. So my wife gave birth, it was early Shabbos morning, 6 in the morning. And I come back afterwards, I walked back to my house, take care of the rest of the family, came back Shabbos night to make the to make the Motzei Shabbos, to make Havdalah, and I asked my wife, how's the baby doing? And we were already experts. She says, he's getting yellow. He looks yellow. So I said, take a blood test. So we take a blood test. I come Sunday morning. It's at 14. It shot up less than 24 hours. So I say to her, you know what, I'm writing into the Rebbe, just to let him know and ask for a bracha that the bris should be on time and it should be able to go down. So I write into the Rebbe. I send in a fax. In those days, it was the fax age. Send in a fax. And I come back Sunday night, and I ask my wife, what's going on? She says to me, it looks like it dropped. So I said, take another blood test. Takes another blood test. Next day in the morning, it's at 6. They let him out. Shabbos, we had the bris. The next Shabbos, everything went well. Sunday after the Shabbos of the bris, the Rebbe used to give out dollars. So there was a member of my community that he was here in New York, and he walked over to the Rebbe, he took $1 for himself, and I didn't say a word to him. I didn't ask for him. I didn't tell a word. He, on his own initiative, said, I'd like to ask $1 for Rabbi Gluckowsky. That's how I'm known in Israel. So the Rebbe looks at him, smiles, and hands him $1 and says, give it to him be'itoi ubezmanoi. Give it to him on time. That's the expression that you use for bris being on time. And he smiled, and the fellow had no idea what the Rebbe had in mind. He ran over to the phone. He says, the Rebbe, give it to him in the proper time with a big smile. I said, I know exactly what the Rebbe had in mind. The bris was on time. Somebody thought about it, that it should be on time. I had you in mind. And that's how he was always. And that's how it is even till today. We feel his presence. There was a fellow that he wrote into the Rebbe about writing on a matzeva for his father. His father had passed away, and he asked the Rebbe to help him write the text on the monument. And the Rebbe told him, remember one thing. A monument is from stone, and the text is also from stone. The real monument is the living monument, and that's the kids. And the text on the living monument is constantly changing by what they're involved in. We all are living monuments, carrying on the work, and the text is constantly changing and developing as we go along with the tremendous work that's going on. But we need everyone. We can't do it ourselves. To conquer the world, we need everyone to help, everyone to be a partner. We're all emissaries. We all have to be living in our communities, involved, having that sense of responsibility. We all have to be those volunteers that we put our personal interests to the side and put the community and other people's interests before us. And when we do that, we're making this place a better world, and we're going to finally get to the goal of changing this world and making it happen and tipping the scale, and that we should be zoiche, we should merit to see the coming of Mashiach.